Hello. In the Crown of Aragon, 639 years ago, it was January 26th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today we have a document from Violant. It's in Latin, and that is okay. I'm shifting my mindset with Latin, where I'm not gonna get all kind of grumpy when I'm like, oh, it's another Latin document. I am going to embrace the Latin because it is just a challenging puzzle. Can put it that way. I'm going to think of it as this challenging puzzle that I'm really going to get better at this year. And in the meantime, we're just going to piece things together as best we can. That's the new Latin mindset. All right. So we start out this letter with Iolans Dei Gratia Regina Aragon, etc. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, it seems like there should be some kind of ending on Aragon in this, but maybe they're kind of not always as dedicated to the Latin endings. Quite sure. But anyway, what that translates to is Violant, by the grace of God, Queen of Aragon, etc. So what you see after Aragon is a little abbreviation for et, which looks sort of like the number 2. And then following that, you've got the character C, and then what's happened is that there's been some repair to the document, and it's covering up a lot of the abbreviation mark that is over that C, but enough of it remains visible to know that this is the abbreviation for etc. And it also makes sense because there's a lot of different regions that are, if you're spelling out all of the official title of the queen, there's just going to be a bunch of place names added in after Aragon. So they do etc. a lot, but then other times when they want to be fancy, I guess, or when they want to really hit it home, we've got a lot of territories, they will list them all out, and we've seen that before. So the first phrase is nice and easy to understand. And then after that, we have a pretty common construction with the addressee appearing before the phrase salutem et gratiam. And the salutem is like 80%, maybe 75% through the second line. There's like a wormhole, and then right next to that there's a big S that there's maybe a stray mark made by the scribe, and that makes it look like it's a big P or something like that, but it's an S. And then ALUT, that's all very legible. And then the abbreviation at the end for salutem, and then et gratiam. So greetings and salutations so on. And the phrase that comes before that is the addressee. And in this case, we've got the procurators and the officials of a town. We can clearly see the third word in the second line is VILL. So, VM. I think that it's a EM ending there, but easy to know what it means in English. The town of, because then we have the letter D for day, and then we have the name of the place. This is where I got stuck because I couldn't immediately recognize this place name and I had to go find it. So, what happens in Latin documents very frequently is that the place name, which is most commonly known by its inhabitants according to a Catalan name, if you're in that region, the Catalonian region of the Crown of Aragon, and of course if you're in some other region, like, there's the language Aragonese for Aragon itself, and so then there might be a slight spelling difference. So the inhabitants, they refer to the place by its name that's used in the everyday vernacular speech of the time, and for most of the places that we're looking at in these letters, that would be the Catalan name. There's other regions of the Mediterranean that are territorially owned by the Crown of Aragon. So I'm thinking of Sicily in particular. And so you'll definitely have other languages as the place name among the inhabitants, but then it's very possible that the officials of the Crown of Aragon would have given those places Catalan names. So then if you've got a Latin document about some place in Sicily, then it's the Latin name that then is being used for what in the minds of the folks in Barcelona would be a Catalan place name, but then the actual inhabitants in Sicily, it would be a name in, like, goodness, what was the local Italian vernacular there? Certainly not the Tuscan vernacular of the north of Italy. There's just so many different vernaculars, and you might think, wow, they really tightened that up, and everybody just started speaking the, dominant vernacular. So the Tuscan vernacular for Italian, the Castilian vernacular for Spanish, but it's really important to realize that a lot of these local, comparatively speaking, local vernaculars, they did not disappear, and there are still people who are speaking them. So a Sicilian vernacular, I think, still exists, but I'm really out of my subject area knowledge there. So, all right. Point is that it's really sometimes very difficult to figure out what the place name is. And when we're talking about place names, the scholarly term for that is the toponym or the toponym. There are a lot of resources about toponyms, dictionaries of toponyms, and there's, it can get really big in terms of the amount of research that has been done and the lists and the glossaries and so on. There's a very widely used Latin toponym dictionary called the Orbis Latinus. The Orbis Latinus has been digitized, and you can search it and find the vernacular translation for the way that the word appears in Latin. the toponym, the way the toponym appears in Latin. So I'll put a link to that in the webpage for today's episode. But even though there are thousands of entries in the Orbis Latinus, when you're getting into some of the more local areas, the smaller towns, they're not going to be in there. The Orbis Latinus covers the larger Mediterranean world. And so when I went to consult it for whatever place name this is that starts with CUB, I could not find an entry in there. And so I decided to go to a new AI agent. And, I don't even know if I'm using the word agent correctly, but new AI product is maybe what I should be saying. So I went to a new AI product that I haven't used for the podcast before, and I've only used a couple times. It's called Perplexity. And apparently, what happens when you go to perplexity.ai is that it will utilize existing LLMs like Claude and ChatGPT and somehow, in consultation with them, search the internet. I'm not quite sure how all of that fits together. But Perplexity did a really good job with my query in the sense that it provided me with a lot of references and gave a well explained case for why I should interpret this word as the Latin toponym for the town of Cubelles. Cubelles is about 55 kilometers down the coast south from Barcelona. And it makes sense that this would be of concern to the Crown of Aragon. It's close to the big city of Barcelona, relatively speaking. And so to have a document about it makes sense versus some of the other possibilities that Perplexity provided for this place name. So, it was okay, but there's still a problem with the AI generated responses, which is that you are getting references associated with claims that the chatbot is making, and then when you go to those references, it's not actually supporting the claim. And in this situation, the AI generated response said that Thomas Bison's book, A Short History of the Crown of Aragon, would have information in it that supports this being interpreted as the town of Cubelles. And it didn't. Like, I was able to do just a keyword search in that text, and this town is not in there. So, maybe I need to search more carefully through Bison's book, but it shouldn't be that hard to track back a reference that the AI generated response is providing you, especially if it's only one reference, which for this section of the AI generated response, it was the only reference that would substantiate the claim. So even though that reference was, I would say, a failure on the part of the chatbot, the overall conclusion, I think, makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to go with it until I see something else that would make a better argument for what this place name is, which I need to not abandon in my mind as a possibility, because you've got to use the AI chatbots provisionally and not as your final step. So anything that I arrive to with the help of the AI chatbot always needs to be subject to revision and not treated as the, conclusive end of the investigation for whatever question I might be using the chatbot for. All right, so wanted to get into the topic of toponyms, and that I've covered pretty well. What is this letter about? This letter is about the ownership of this town, I think, in terms of its governance, and also probably some of the revenue that's coming from whatever kind of taxation will go on. And I'm gathering this from just understanding a few of the words in the document. So that too is provisional. I mean, everything is provisional in this stage of the research. But after the salutem e gratiam in the second line, we have the name Petrus, and then in the third line, de Mari. So there's a Petrus de Mari that has reached out to Violant and made some kind of request about being able to be in charge of this town in some way. And who was the previous person that was in charge of it? Well, that is in the end of line 5. We've got Bernardi de, and then on the next line, Fortiano. So that is Sibylla's brother, Bernat da Fortía, the rascal type brother that has kind of been a source of embarrassment for Sibylla. And so he is being dispossessed in this document, and the ownership of this town, I'm using the word ownership very lightly here, the authority over this town is being transferred to Petrus de Mari. And there's something that's pretty weird in the probata for this document. So on the next folio at the bottom, you have 3 lines in the right side of the page there that are usually where it just says, I am the scribe, and this was dictated to me or given to me by the person that, is being attributed as the sender. But in this case, we've got Bernat da Fortía at the very beginning of the probata. So what I'm thinking is that this is fulfilling a function of removing the authority of Bernat da Fortía, as well as being testified to as a faithful copy of the document that's going out. So it's interesting that Bernat da Fortía appears again. There is an outside possibility that Bernat da Fortía was somehow there. I don't know his exact whereabouts at this point in the story. I know that everyone is being kept track of. All of Sibylla's people are being watched over, and some of them are indeed imprisoned. I don't think that someone as high status as Bernat da Fortía is imprisoned, but it could be some kind of house arrest situation. But I doubt he's in Barcelona, although he might be. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there with Bernat da Fortía's name in the probata statement there. So I will try to look out for another instance of that in an upcoming document. For now, though, we've arrived to the end of this episode, and thanks for listening to this latest installment of the Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of the Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. In the meantime, take care.